All right.
Perfect. Okay, all right, everybody. Thanks for being here for session 5 of our 6-part webinar series leading up to conference in September. As you know, my name is Morgan Arwood. I am the membership director for MRCA. Today we've got Mr. Matt McCreary with us again. He's with Safety Resources out of Indianapolis. And he spoke with us for this program, what, 2 years ago, Matt? Is that right?
Yeah, it was either last year or a year before for sure.
I think it was, it must have been last year actually, because this is the second year of the program. So Matt has, many years experience in safety and in the construction industry. So he comes to us with plenty of knowledge and expertise and experience to speak on this. Today, he will be talking about best practices in steep slope fall protection. And at the end of this session, I'll have the code word for today and a few closing remarks, and then we'll be good to go. So with that, Matt, you're free to take over.
Perfect. So I am curious. I mean, so the people that were last year on the flat roof best practices, we had 2 parts to that. I mean, is there any repeated attendees?
Yes, actually, I would say the majority of them are.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think most of them. And then and Dennis confirms that he was here last year.
Well, I did change the PowerPoint because steep slope and low slope are pretty different.
Wait, sure.
I mean, I'm talking to roofers here, so again, feel free to just unmute and ask questions. I really kind of like that. In fact, I really like in-person training over virtual training because I can get people to tell stories and to interact and to have conversations about what we're talking about. So please, I would encourage you to do that as we move forward with this presentation. But with low slope, there's a lot of different options. There's a lot of things. With steep slope, it was kind of actually hard preparing for this on like what are best practices per se, because I'm just going to start out with a little story. When I was a young safety professional, I would say maybe 3rd, 4th year in, I've been doing this for 16 years now. I cannot believe that. I decided that I was going to be smart and I was going to apply for a variance for steep slope slate roofing. And my basis for that was I was watching my roofing client that was doing slate roofing drag their ropes across these slate tiles, and occasionally one would come loose and it would kind of create like a projectile down to the base of the rake edge or the gutter edge or even to the ground. And so the variance that I put together was for steep slope roofing, as long as it wasn't over like 812 or 1012 or something like that, it was like still walkable, quote unquote walkable. I said, okay, we're going to set our warning lines back 6 feet from the rake edge. And then on the gutter edge, we're going to install a system scaffold to where if someone were to fall, they would roll down to that scaffold and be caught by that, therefore eliminating any type of 6-foot free fall or 6-foot fall. And honestly, I thought it was bulletproof. I thought, man, I'm going to get this variance from OSHA and everything's going to go great. Well, didn't hear. Number one, the projects that I was trying to get the variance for came and went, and I heard nothing from OSHA, which is pretty standard for government. The wheels don't move so fast. But then I finally did get a response, and the response was pretty much, no, we do not grant the variance. It's pretty much, they didn't give me any explanation on why or what. So when you talk about best practices, really, it's hard to talk about that unless you just know that when you're on a steep slope that you're 100% tied off. And we will talk about some things that I think we can help our employees with as far as making them more cognizant of the fact that this is a very dangerous profession. Steep slopes, in my opinion, probably more dangerous than low slope, but that could be argued depending on what systems you're using. So I wanted to tell that variant story because, again, I thought it was really well thought out. I put a lot of work into it, and it was like, no, you can't as much as they say you can argue creates a greater hazard or something's infeasible, you really can't, or at least in my experience 13 or so years ago, that wasn't the case. So as a reminder, this isn't safety training necessarily on how to do fall protection. This isn't, if you're here and you're actually going to go out in the field and wear your harness and tie off, this isn't that. This is more from kind of a management overview level. So steep slope roofing is defined as any roof system that's greater than 412. I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know everybody knows this. But if you look at some of the stats as far as workplace fatalities, you see a 17% of workplace fatalities involve falls, and around 700 deaths related to slips, trips, and falls. So that adds a little bit to it, but 17% falls second in fatality, workplace fatalities, second only to roadway incidents, which is not a surprising statistics either. So again, when we're talking about falls, we're talking about when it happens, it's often very severe, sometimes to the maximum level, which resulting in a fatality. So finding a way to communicate the importance of this is going to be key. Falls are very complicated. I always tell folks when I'm doing fall protection training, I say, okay, a 6 foot or 200-pound worker falling 6 feet would hit the ground in less than 1 second. And then I always find a young guy and I ask him, hey, listen, if I gave you $100 to jump off this, let's say 10-foot roof and land in this grass, would you take that bet? And then almost 90+% of those folks will say, yeah, I'd take that bet. Absolutely. $100. Great. So perfect. And you probably be just fine because you're jumping and you're planning for it and everything. But falls, I let them know, listen, falls are unplanned and you're hitting the ground in less than 1 second. You are not a cat. You are not nimbly bimbly jumping from tree to tree. They are happen in an instant and are incredibly complicated. And there's a multiple cause of all the falls that I've investigated. There's always more than just one root cause. I mean, there is a root cause, sure, and oftentimes it's someone made a mistake somewhere, but there's oftentimes a lot of secondary causations like environmental factors, the equipment that they were using, what they did the night before sometimes. I mean, there's all these things that can kind of go into it. Heat, cold. So because falls are so complicated, one fall protection solution may not be your best option for another. So when we're looking at steep slope, we have to look at number one, where we're tying off and how we're doing that. Number two, chicken or the egg, first man up rule. How do we as a company view that? And is that policy written in a way that meets what OSHA tries to establish as a first man up rule, meaning the first man up, I believe the first man up is able to go and set that very first peak anchor, tie off to it, and then set the rest of the peak anchors for the crew. And then from there, that's how you would maintain 100% fall protection. But that first guy up would not be tied off while he's setting that very first anchor. I've seen framing companies back in the day. I'm not seeing them in a while, but framing companies used to send out permanent trusses that had permanent anchors, trusses that had permanent anchors on them that you could just literally flash around and make watertight, and you just leave them in, bend them over at the end and leave them in for like residential and things like that. So for commercial, we don't see much steep slope in commercial really anymore. A lot of you folks, if you're like some of our clients, you subcontract a lot of the steep slope folks. When I was talking about slate roofing, that was a big business at one point, still is, I think, to those that specialize in it. But I'm not sure 20% of you would be involved in that type of work. So steep slope gets a little tricky because, again, you're not doing it as often, and then maybe sometimes you're hiring subcontractors. So best practice when you hire subcontractors is just, oh goodness, I'm going to forget his name, the attorney that puts on most of these for the MRCA. Wow, you guys all know him. Gary.
Yeah.
Gary. Oh, there you go. Thank you. He would say, what do your contracts say to your subcontractors? Well, that's really what attorneys look at, is like, what do the contracts say? And then if you are supplying supervisory personnel, how are you ensuring that these individuals are meeting the expectations that OSHA has established in its 1926 standards? And if you're not enforcing that, there's a huge liability risk for you involving subcontractors. OSHA is scary, but attorneys are way, way more scary. Trust me, I've sat through enough depositions to know that I don't want to do that again. So let's see here. 1926 fall protection covers a lot of different segments and industries, but the subpart M 1926 501 is really where we're going to focus today. And really, we're not going to go through the standards at all, but I wanted to make that point. The 1926 501 is where you're going to find all 502, 503 is where you're going to fall all of your requirements. So roles and responsibilities. So again, we have a steep slope project coming up. If safety is planned for, then I believe that we can be almost as efficient or as efficient as if we just did not have the safety. But what I'm running into problems now that I'm working with a lot of general contractors is, if they have like a steep slope portion of their projects, those guys are coming out and they're not realizing that we're actually going to make them follow OSHA regulations, and they're just not used to it. And they get paid not by the hour, they get paid by how much they get done. And so a lot of times these guys will just walk right off the job site if they're told that they need to be tied off, which is, that's a different world than what I live in, obviously, as a safety nerd. But we need to make sure that our people that we're hiring for, or if our own people that are working on steep slope roofing, are qualified. And here's the definition as OSHA lays out: one who, by possession of a recognized degree, certificate, or professional standing, or, and this is where we use it a lot in the roofing industry, extensive knowledge, training, and experience, has successfully demonstrated ability to solve or resolve problems relating to the subject matter, the work, or the project. Excuse me. And then the employer must be able to demonstrate qualified status. That is not a certification. That is a qualification. That is something that you would just determine for yourself of who is a qualified person. And that qualified person oftentimes will be the same person as your competent person. And your competent person is one who's capable of recognizing hazards in the environment, has the authority to stop work, has the authorization to take prompt corrective actions to eliminate them, and then is also qualified. So if you have a steep slope project, a best practice would be to make sure that your qualified/competent person really knows the business and really knows how to maintain your fall protection equipment and gear and all that other things that we're going to go through here in a little bit. But this individual, listen, all the safety guys, unless you want to pay a safety guy to camp out on your jobs and be a full-time site safety person, this individual, your supervisor is literally going to be your safety culture for whatever project you pick. If he cares and enforces fall protection and setting of peak anchors and keeping on the ropes or retractables or whatever, and he's on that, then they're going to do it. And if he's not on it and he starts turning a blind eye or starts not looking at things as closely as they should, then your project's probably not going to be as safe, and you probably are opening yourself up for maybe a little bit of risk. You know, I'm not going to read all these, but there are some knowledge requirements that OSHA kind of goes through. You know, making sure in all fall protection training, you know, we're starting to go towards, it's been in place for about 8 years now. All fall protection training, we require each individual to bring a harness, or we'll have some harnesses set aside, and we actually put them through a donning and doffing, I guess is what they call it, you know, putting on and taking off the harness to make sure that every individual knows how to wear the harness correctly, because we've all seen it. I've seen guys tied off to each other. I've seen guys I've tied off to PVC standpipes or you know what I mean, the little PVC that comes off the roof. I've seen folks tie off the buckets of glue. And of course, I built a house this past year, and I've seen guys on 10, 12, 11, 12 slope using foam as their fall protection, just a little foam pad on their knees. So I feel like I've seen it all, but I'm sure there's other stuff out there that I haven't actually. I'm sure there's some a level of risk that I've not seen yet, and people are pretty inventive with that kind of thing. So making sure you're a competent person, make sure that all your equipment's inspected, it's in good condition, you know, that the rules are correctly outlined. You know, does our lull operator have a certification, or if there's an aerial lift on site, do they have their certifications? All these things is kind of where the competent person falls in. If your competent person's on the north side of the project and OSHA shows up on the south side of the project, let's say it's a large hospital project, because the really big steep slope project that I did recently was a hospital where they had a sawtooth roof, and it was probably 12 at least slope. We had roof access because there was a helipad there, but and we were able to set our anchors really cleanly because we had access pretty much to the peak. But what I saw was, I mean, a lot of these guys that were coming from the commercial, they weren't as comfortable. In fact, they were very uncomfortable with working on this sloped roofing that was maybe 200 feet in the air. I mean, it was terrifying, honestly, if you're not, you know, if that's not something that you do on a regular basis. So making sure you select qualified workers to do the job is incredibly important. And then we're going to actually talk about rescue as well, because that's something I think that people forget is required in the fall protection standard. If you have a steep slope project, let's use that 200 foot in the air hospital thing that I was talking about, you better damn well have a rescue plan for those folks. And there's a variety of ways you can put that together, but I'll show you how we sometimes do it for some of the smaller projects here towards the end of the presentation. So let's talk about conventional systems. Conventional systems for us is, okay, well, we're not going to be able to eliminate the hazard because we have to get up on the roof to roof it. We really aren't allowed to use passive fall protection like guardrails because steep slope roofing pretty much disallows that. There are some systems out there, parapet clamps and other things that kind of can meet that requirement, but they're few and far between. I have seen it installed at the Gainbridge or Bankers Life Field where the Pacers play. That's a million different names in the past 10 years. But I have seen systems like that installed, but they're very costly. And it was for a very large roofing project. Fall restraint systems. I love the idea of it. I love I love that the thought process is there, like you physically can't get to the edge, but I hate the actual real life implementation of fall restraint, because when you're talking fall restraint, number one, that automatically outlaws retractables. We can't use retractables at that point because we physically can't we can't have those things locked out like 10 feet away. And then if we're using rope and rope grabs, okay, so let's say my anchor's 10 foot back and I set my rope grab for 9 feet of slack, that is fall restraint. If I have 9 feet of slack from the anchor point and I'm 10 feet away from the roof edge, I am compliant with fall restraint. However, if I start going left or right and working at an angle, what does my slack turns into 12, 13, 14 feet. And then inevitably the person that's performing that work, they're going to go back to that vertical line. And instead of having the 9 foot of slack for the 10 foot leading edge, they're now going to have 14 foot of slack. And now we're in a fall arrest situation. So we still could be compliant as long as it's a system that can be used for both fall restraint and fall arrest. But in general, for roofers, fall restraint is very, very, it's a rare occurrence to use it effectively, in my opinion. I know people can argue that the opposite of that, but that's where I fall on it. Fall arrest. Okay. If we were to fall, what they're saying is we have to be caught within 6 feet, no more than 6 feet of free fall anytime we're using a fall arrest equipment or fall arrest system. The cool part about steep slope roofing is that we don't have on flat roofing is that we actually can tie off above our head a lot. That is an option that we do have, and that really helps with our free fall, especially if we're using a retractable. But even if a rope grab's set up correctly, we can do that. Administrative controls, really, I don't see it come on very often, and for steep slope, it's almost non-existent. I can't think of actually any type of administrative controls that would work with steep slope. So, all right. Okay. I mean, if we were in a class, I would be throwing kickballs at people and making them answer questions. But I mean, has anybody here worked on a project where they've used safety nets? And I expect the answer to be no, because while they are allowed, I've never worked with them. I've only seen them when I visited cities like Chicago and New York City. And even then, I don't think that was their purpose. I think their purpose was more for debris, less for personnel, because if you start using safety nets for personnel, you have a lot of drop test and testing requirements each and every day that is pretty cumbersome. Guardrails, cable rails, all these passive systems are options to use if maybe you're in an aerial lift, but for steep slope, they don't really apply. Active systems, so fall restraint. The biggest difference between fall arrest and fall restraint is fall restraint reduces your anchorage point requirements from 5,000 to 3,000 pounds. Now, remember, your anchorage point does not need to be certified anchorage point. It just needs to be installed per manufacturer's instructions by a qualified person. We've talked about fall restraint, talked about fall arrest. Our folks need, yes.
This is Jason Blickendorfer. I just want to ask you a quick question about cable rails.
Sure.
So if you were to design your own cable rail system, how would you have that tested to make sure that it was OSHA compliant?
Cable rails systems that work are ones that have turnbuckles installed into them, and that the people that are maintaining those cable rails have the ability to daily adjust the tension in those rails, in those railing systems. So 3/4 inch cable rail system, flagged at 6 foot intervals. you can maintain compliance with that. I mean, just making sure that you hit the appropriate, what OSHA defines as appropriate width for the cable itself. But what happens is iron workers will go out and they'll install angle iron verticals, and then they'll install cable rails, but they won't give us any turntables. They'll just use the Crosbys,
Yeah.
and they'll put 3 Crosbys on one, and that's great for like the first week. But then as soon as it gets cold and gets warm again and all that other stuff, all of a sudden we start getting this. Where's my camera?
Contraction.
Yeah, exactly. And without a turnbuckle. Turnbuckle. Thank you. I said it right the first time.
Good.
I have some Beck Odelay in my head right now. That's a very much a Generation X comment. Okay. Yeah, unless they have a turnbuckle in it, you cannot be successful with a cable rail system, in my opinion.
And we've never used them for fall protection, but we've used them like in conjunction with fencing, just for debris, to make sure that did not blow off the roof below. But I didn't know what your thoughts were on it.
Yeah, I mean, putting that with snow fence, I mean, I love that. I love that idea. I mean, and I don't mind cable rails. I just think that iron, like oftentimes the GC is going to hire an iron package, and that's like they start looking at dollars and cents, and they start cutting things, and sometimes those turnbuckles get cut, and then it turns into a pretty big issue if the roofers or mechanical trades that are running line sets on the roof, they decide that they want to use those. It gets a little weird because now they're like, who maintains it? Well, really, I guess at that point, because the iron workers are gone, it's the GC's responsibility, but the GC doesn't have the tools to do it. So it kind of turns into this catch-22 almost.
For sure. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep. No, thank you for the question. So, fall restraint, fall rest systems, deceleration distance, you guys have to, there's different packs, different lanyards, and you've seen them all, right? There's I'll tell you a story. Okay, so everybody's seen the pack. It has a pack and it's wrapped in plastic. It looks like this. That's your shock absorbing pack. Then there's the scrunchy pack. Those are the two of most common shock absorbers that we see. I got a call from someone. This is a long time ago. I promise I'm not making this up, but they opened like 10 new lanyards that had the plastic pack, and they thought that was part of the manufacturer's packaging. So they took a razor and cut through that plastic so that could be like released. Well, that's obviously a big no-no. That plastic's supposed to be there. It's part of the deceleration component. And it's something that we as safety people, or if we're even just involved in safety, need to make sure that our folks know that, hey, that plastic needs to be in good shape in order for this pack to be used. And in fact, that's kind of why I prefer the scrunchy type lanyard better. Some guys prefer it, some guys don't. But I just wanted to mention that because I've seen a lot of lanyards that have been damaged because the plastic has been cut or removed intentionally or unintentionally. And then we have to remember that the deceleration distance does add to our maximum fall. However, it does not add to what OSHA describes as free fall distance. So our goal with setup is to install a fall protection system that allows us to not fall greater than 6 feet. If we have a shock absorber in there, we still may go to another 9.5 feet. So we rip out 3.5 feet max, but that we don't have to factor that into what they call free fall. Free fall systems is defined as the measured from the foot level before the fall to the foot level after the fall, before any fall or rest equipment activates. So again, retractables activate much quicker than lanyards, obviously, but they also put more force on the body. Just keep that in mind. I just think that's something we always need to work for. The hardest roofs are the roofs that fall in that 7 to 14-foot range or 7 to 12-foot range. It's the roofs that where if we're using fall arrest and we're tying off at our feet, they're very difficult to have a 6-foot worker not hit the ground. You know, we worked at the Crane Naval Base down here in Indiana, the largest inland naval base in the country, and we had a lot of little roofs that needed to be replaced that were very, very low. They're underground, really. The building itself, the roofs were very low. They were high enough to where fall equipment was required, but they were low enough that it was very hard to tie off. And if I get 3 feet away from my anchor, I'm still hitting the ground. So what we ended up having to do, and I think they bid it right the second time, was that we ended up setting up scaffolding all the way around the roof in order just to eliminate the fall completely. That's very unique, very niche, but wanted to make mention of it. Clearance distance needs to be considered. You know, there's a lot of conjecture out there in the industry on what is a safe height to work from, as far as when we can tie off effectively. But typically, we're looking at you're looking at probably at least, if you're tied off at your feet, you're looking at about 15 feet, and if you're tied off above your head, you're looking at about 9 feet. You need to account for, and that's pretty standard. That's a pretty standard deal. This is just an interesting graphic, I think. We have your retractables, your class A retractables, you're stopping much quicker than, let's say, your foot level tie off lanyard, right? This is when you start seeing the 12, 17, where are they going? 20, I mean, they're saying 25 feet. I mean, I have a hard, that means they probably set it up wrong. But you know, leading edge SRL, you know, these distances, you can see how much these retractables do it. But I mean, I've never seen a steep slope guy use a retractable. I think rope and rope grabs are still the gold standard for that. I may be wrong. I haven't seen much steep slope in a long time, but rope and rope grabs tend to be where we fall. We've talked about all this. Remember, if you have some big, we're actually big or small. I run into this a lot, actually. Still, we have a guy that's maybe he's 19 years old, and he still weighs $105. And I mean, you know, you need to make sure that he is equipped with an extra small harness, because if he's wearing a medium harness or a large harness, his back D-ring is going to be, you know, in his lower back probably, and he's not going to be able to cinch his legs correctly. And the same goes for our big guys, right? Over 310, we need to make sure that they have a harness that is rated for them, and they do make them. They are a little bit more expensive, but that's also something just that's going to happen, because if we don't have that, then they're not going to be able to get their leg straps on. Therefore, they're not going to use the harness. Therefore, we are creating a hazard with fall protection. So keep that in mind. Make sure that your folks have the correct size harness. I also really, you know, again, live and in-person fall protection training, I have a kind of a goodie bag that I bring with me, and I go through connections, because I this is one of the most commonly this and multiple people tying off to anchors is something that I see way too often. I feel like it's just a training error. People aren't talking about it. But we always tie off hook to ring. We cannot tie off hook to hook. We cannot have 2 hooks to 1 ring. We cannot have a mountain climbing carabiner. We cannot have hook to strap unless that strap has an actual ring component to it, like a D-ring choker. There are some manufacturers now that are coming out with lanyards that allow you to do that, but I've not seen them implemented in the roofing industry to date. A lot of hooks are compatible with horizontal lifelines, but you need to make sure that they are before you use them as such. Talk about when you're talking to your guys, make sure you're talking to them about compatibility of connections on the job site. your harness, make sure that they're inspecting it. We recommend to all of our clients that we actually pull the serial number, or we'll actually identify each harness as a unique number, and we will use that to inspect annually from a third party, but our folks still should be inspecting these daily. If you have folks that are welding or whatever, that's again something that you really maybe even need to inspect more often. I've seen some pretty interesting harnesses from welders. Need to inspect before use, and at least annually documented by a competent person. Harnesses should never be modified. Do not write or paint on them, etc. And then should be taken out of service immediately if defective or exposed to impact. Most of our harnesses now have a tag on them that will let us know if they have been subjected to a fall. If you see that on site, make sure that that's removed. It takes a lot. So again, we're still going to talk about the steep slope first man up. I think it's the best practice. Make sure that you have a policy on first man up rule. How do you implement that? And then another thing that I think is forgotten but is required, and you want to have it if this ends up being a thing, because if you don't, let's say someone gets seriously hurt because you weren't able to rescue them, not having a rescue plan would be a serious issue. There's the 10 elements. I'm not going to go through that. I'm going to show you the definition of prompt rescue requires getting to personnel within 6 minutes after a fall. So oftentimes professional services like high angle rescue folks, that 6 minutes is going to be very, very hard to get to. So that's why we've developed some verbiage where we feel like we can be effective with rescue without putting anybody at greater risk. And so what we've done is, and my formatting was, I was fighting my formatting when I was copying and pasting these slides, so I apologize for the off tab dots. But we've implemented the self rescue. Okay, sometimes guys fall in retractables and they are able to climb themselves back up to that level. Okay, again. Well, I'll just go into the number 2, which is, okay, maybe on a steep slope application, maybe it's a 30-foot max rake edge. Maybe the gutter edge is 14 feet off the ground. We can use a ladder rescue. But I always, always, always recommend, if we're using a ladder rescue, that we bring that individual back up to the work surface so that their fall protection does not have to be disengaged in case they are in shock or otherwise compromised or injured. I do not want you in your rescue plan to be unhooking individuals and then bringing them down an extension ladder in the event that there could be a secondary fall. Just keep that in mind. Ladders can be used for rescue, but they're not ideal, and they should be used in a very specific manner. And your folks need to be trained on that. Assisted rescue with mechanically aided. This is ideal if you have an aerial lift on the job site. Let's get up to them. Let's scoop them up. At that point, we can disconnect them, maybe even connect them into the lanyard in the lift, and then bring them back down so that we can get them emergency services. And then the other one that we see that has happened, I have been involved in this, and OSHA has challenged us on this. But in a rescue situation, you can use whatever means necessary. And so if you need to use an assisted rescue with the crane, getting the headache ball to wherever it needs to be, this is for like our bigger projects, you can do that. It just really needs to be well thought out and planned, and folks need to be at least trained on it. And this is, again, maybe not all of your crew members need to be trained on this rescue stuff, but the folks that are sorry, let me back up. That made bad sense, actually. Maybe not all your folks need to be trained on assisted rescue with the crane because they're not working on projects where that even is applicable. However, when you're doing, again, a best practice that we talked about when low slope roofing, if you're completing a site specific safety plan and this is mentioned within it, this needs to be actually discussed and the crew needs to understand, hey, listen, if I were to fall on the and I'm dangling 60 feet in the air, you know, how am I going to get back up? Okay, we're going to use the crane, and this is how we're going to do it. And it doesn't have to be necessarily like an 8-hour train, or it doesn't have to be an 8-hour training anyways. It can be something, it can still be a 20-minute, 10-minute thing. As long as they understand how it works. Any questions on rescue before I move on? Perfect. So specific anchor types. This was brought up in the flow slope deal too. You need to make sure that your individuals have access to the manufacturer's instructions for your peak anchors so that they know what type of screws or nails to be used, whether they're in sheathing or trusses or purlings or whatever. You know, a lot of us are probably thinking steep slope and we're thinking like a peak house like that. But I mean, I've seen steep slope where it's a domed roof. We've had steep slope applications on, and I'm going to forget what it's called. It's like a gypsum roof. It's something really soft where it's like where they use it to create a dome shape. I mean, and we've had to really think about how in the hell we're going to tie these folks off and get them up to that level. And I mean, we've developed systems where we've run ropes up and over a domed roof in order to be able to implement correct fall protection. But making sure that your crew members know, be consistent. Honestly, ideally, everybody has either Guardian or Faltech, one of the two, or whichever one you're using. If they're consistent throughout your crews, then I mean, as a best practice, I would definitely say like stay consistent. Make sure that each of your crew has the manufacturer's instructions, and make sure that your competent person understands. Hey, listen, these need to be installed correctly. I mean, my pet peeve is I see two screws on either side of a peak anchor. That drives me nuts because honestly, if I fall and I'm tied off to that, I could, let's say, rip that out. And the anchor then just becomes a projectile after I hit the ground to add insult to injury.
Matt, I have
yes.
a question.
Yes,
perfect. This is Jason again. So with the Faltech and the Guardian steep slope, like tie-off anchors, those are just specific to steep slope. Those are not low slope applications, correct?
We talked about this on the low slope one. They are still allowed for low slope applications as long as the manufacturer allows them, I believe. But you have to be, they give you very specific shear angles, so they have to be installed correctly and in line with where your people are working. So that's why when we were doing the low slope stuff, that's why we talked about, listen, if you're still using these types of anchors, you're setting yourself up for some failure. Roof carts and things like that are much more effective.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that everybody else understands that. So thank you.
Yeah, on the low slope one, I remember this slide is we used an example of a corrugated steel roof. And in order for you to use one of these anchors, you actually had to put blocking in between each valley and fasten it down and then have that at the appropriate angle. So
another problem we've come into is these are rated and tested on 20 gauge.
Right. For sure.
And then you know, people trying to use them with insulation installed on top of the metal roofing. So at that point, you know,
yeah.
But again, yeah, there's side loading and stuff like that. So
yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to bring it up because I wanted everybody to understand, if they have not dealt with it, that like, I mean, you can use these, but like there are certain guidelines that you have to follow to cover yourself in those applications.
Right. I mean, no, that's a really great point. it's something that I really focus on. Our firm really focuses on making sure that our roofing clients really understand when these are to be used, because again, a lot of folks will show up and they just think these are just, these are the end all be all, and they install them everywhere, but really it's very specific circumstances.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. I really do appreciate the questions. Again, in person is my jam. But that being said, oh, we only got 14 minutes. See, look at me. I say that. So there's your 16D nails. That's for your sheeting. I see on a lot of flat roofs, you see your permanent fall protection systems, but we don't see that very often on steep slope. However, I have seen truss manufacturers install anchor points at the peak, and those have been pretty awesome to use because then you can just flash them in and bend them over. But again, that's a residential application, and I don't think we have too many of y'all out there in the MRCA. Site-specific safety plans. Again, I pulled this out of that Crane Naval Base, right? So like I highly recommend, if you're not doing site plans, to do something. Ours is a little beefy because we don't really want to be challenged on our plans. We don't want the Corps of Engineers to come back and say, hey, oh, you forgot about your blah, blah, blah. So we have it about 15 pages long, but a lot of that's cookie cutter, and our competent people know that some of it's cookie cutter, but we have them focus on. So we have them focus on the emergency plan, the fall protection zones, which is what you're seeing here. And we have them focus on what to do in emergency, fall protection, and the JHA for this particular job. And we have a sign-in sheet on all of our site plans. So you could take this verbiage and you could put it into your site plan, and then you could have everybody sign off that, hey, listen, on this steep slope main roof on building 1908, I'm going to use a personal fall arrest system, includes anchor, lanyard, SRL attached to a full body harness. And you have your individuals sign off on this so that if something were to happen, you could either claim employee misconduct or you could defend yourself, I guess, better. No more than one employee per anchorage point, right? I see it too often, right? We'll have 10 roofers on a roof and only 5 anchors. That's a no-no. So site-specific safety plans, really cool, easy. OSHA loves them. That's the kind of thing that we're looking for. Or I think that's a really good best practice. If you're not doing a site plan, you probably should look into doing that. This was on the low slope one. I'm not going through the whole thing, but just like low slope, if we're getting on steep slope and we think that it's an older building and we know there's deck replacement or there's some structural issues, you need to make sure that you fully investigate the structural integrity of the system or the roof before you put your employees or your subcontractors up to that location. Huge liability issue. Really, honestly, a lot of fatalities happen because of bad decking, folks just stepping through a piece of sheeting that's been rotted or whatever and falling 20, 30, 40 feet. I mean, I have had that happen. I do not want to have that happen again, but it probably will. We need to make sure that if there's any PMs or estimators in here, that they're really, we need to look at this. And if we feel like it's a concern, we need to document that. Maybe you have, I mean, I've not seen it, but maybe if it's bad enough, maybe you do call a structural engineer to take a look at it. I mean, that could be the case. This is not roofing, but you look at what the Hard Rock, what happened there in New Orleans. They came out, and OSHA's investigation has proven that the owner wanted a certain thing. Caesars or Hard Rock wanted a certain thing. And in order for them to get it, the engineers or the architects had to go back and engineer something that was not as structurally, did not meet any type of structural guidelines. And therefore it collapsed that floor. And then from there it was a chain effect and collapsed the rest of them. just it's a pre-planning thing, and it's something that really, if you do it wrong and you take shortcuts, you could be putting not only your company in jeopardy, you could be putting yourself in jeopardy via negligence. But that's a whole nother topic for Gary. So integrity of older buildings, let's keep that up. Inspecting the first man up rule, I do want to remind you there is an exemption for inspecting, but you got to make sure that there's no other work ongoing, and that you literally are only using it to take a measurement or whatever. I mean, the use of drones and all these other types of really cool technology are coming more and more prevalent. I'm seeing some really cool systems. I know a lot of roofing companies, some of our bigger roofing companies, they don't even have estimators go up on the roof anymore. They just have drones, and they go around and they look at what they need to do, and that's how they bid the work. First man up rule, chicken or the egg. You can argue the opposite, but I again believe that OSHA does allow the first man up to be untied off as long as he's going directly to inspect and then install that first anchor point. This is the interpretation letter. It's readily available. If you click on 1926 500A1, you can pull up this exemption. It I would say it comes into play about 3 or 4 times a year for throughout our firm, because Betty next door will take a picture of someone out on a roof without fall protection. But then when OSHA shows up, or when OSHA asks us why it was happening, we can oftentimes, hopefully, if everything's going right, we can point towards this exemption and say, hey, listen, there was no work ongoing. They were just up there to inspect. I mean, obviously you want to be truthful with that. So we wouldn't say that if there was actually work ongoing, but it does come up quite often. So last man down is the same deal. It's employer designated person assigned to removing the temporary devices or securing permanent fall protection anchors before descending to a lower level. While first man up anchors are sometimes deemed infeasible, some safety professionals contend that OSHA regulations actually exempt the first man up, last man down from compliance for about 15 minutes for making an inspection, investigation, or assessment of workplace conditions. And that's where I fall. I don't know how else to install. I don't know how else to install an anchor point at a ridge if we can't get to it. So common sense, in my opinion. But again, people have opposites. And then kind of like, honestly, for the last 7 minutes, and I wanted to talk about some of the technology that's coming up, that's available. And honestly, I think the roofing industry probably will be on the leading edge of some of this stuff, I would think. Maybe not so much this is virtual reality training. So Purdue University here in Indiana got a really cool big money grant from OSHA to develop a fall protection VR training. So you can get your Oculus from your kids. You can buy this program and you can train your workforce on actually, they can select the right tools for their job. They can go through this whole process, and the gamification, I think they call it, of fall protection training for this younger generation. This is how they learn, right? This is more entertaining than someone like me standing in front of the group with a kickball, asking questions and speaking for 3, sometimes 4 hours on fall protection.
We've got a version of this that the ASSP put out a while back.
Really?
Yeah, it's Oculus, everything like that, and you select you do a let me see, you check out your harness and all your equipment, inspect it, put it on, and it simulates a fall to see whether you've made the right choices or not.
Oh, hold on 1 second. People just got back from my office. I got to remind them that I'm on a call. Well, can you type that link in the, or do you have that? Can you email that to me?
Yeah, definitely.
I shouldn't know about that, but that's fantastic.
Hey, Stephen, when they fall, if it's not successful, what happens?
You start over.
Oh, okay.
So like you said, it's kind of a gamified, and then you're actually standing on a roof and you look over the edge and it gives you that feeling, hey, I'm on a roof.
Right.
It's pretty wild.
I was wondering if it was like Call of Duty where you'd splatter all over
Oh,
the,
no. It doesn't get graphic.
that's good.
Well, we can use one of those e-collars, and if they fall, you can just give them a little
Shock
bug.
'em.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That'd be awesome.
But
yeah, I'll send you the link.
I knew that it was being used. I did not know that there was those systems. That would be, yeah, I would appreciate. I mean, if you can maybe email Morgan. I mean, that may be something, Morgan, that the whole industry, your whole organization may be interested in.
Absolutely, it would be. Yeah.
Okay, I'll send it.
Yeah, Stephen, if you email it to me, I'll email it out to everybody.
10-4, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. That's cool. I feel like I should have known about that, but that's great. Fall protection apps. These are almost like advertisements, but you can have each one of your workers download the Harness Hero app, and it makes sure that they know they've gone through the basics of that. Miller Fall Protection has a pretty cool app where you can type in where you're at, how high you are. You can type in what type of work you're doing and how much rest you have, and then it'll tell you whether the configuration that you chose is acceptable or not. So just keep that in mind. But the coolest thing, and this is where I think the roofing industry, they got to figure out the big brother part. They got to figure out the HIPAA stuff. But a lot of folks now have an Apple Watch. The Apple commercial that you recently saw all over the Super Bowl where the people were hiking and it says, okay, we've detected a fall. What's going on? I fell, but I'm okay. I did not fall. No, I need help. I fell. And then what's going to happen with this wearable technology is you're going to have all your roofers, you're going to have all of them wearing these watches. And if there's a fall, you're going to know about it, and emergency services are going to know about it. And you're going to be much more quick to the you're gonna have much more control over that response. Now, again, there's a whole HIPAA thing that they're gonna have to figure out, because these things monitor your heart rate, they monitor all types of stuff that could possibly be a violation with HIPAA. So I think that we're a little ways off from this, but I do feel like for falls, they've not invented the bubble backpack, where you fall and then all of a sudden before you hit the ground, you turn into a bubble and float away or bounce away. But they have invented these watches and these wearable devices that can detect if you fall. And I think that's kind of the next frontier. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I would say that in the next 10 years, this will be something that you'll see on sites. Large general contractors may require it. There's actually software already out there that will tell people like, hey, like, let's say we're just for a simple one, like we're coring on a 5th floor. On the 4th floor, they'll create a no-go hazard. And then your watch, if you're walking up to it, your watch will alert you that you're coming up onto a dangerous area. Then if you get closer, your watch will alert you again, but then also call your supervisor. And then if you get through it, then everybody knows it, and now you're in trouble, or however that works. But we'll see how that all goes. Construction is a little slow to technology, but it's something that I think is coming. So again, fall detection, heart rate, GPS, all that stuff. If you have maintenance crews that sometimes work alone, this is something that I think you should be. I think for their Christmas present, I think you should be getting them Apple Watches, because if they fall and they're working alone, we can actually we can get people care, and we can get people to where they need to be, rescue services to where they need to be to complete it. So it's 3 o'clock. I am punctual. That worked out really well. Thank you for the questions. Any other questions before we log off?
I just have a quick one, Matt, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
When do you think that they will actually eliminate safety nets as fall protection?
Well, you know how I talked about OSHA being slow to the draw on a lot of stuff. I have a hard time seeing them ever eliminating it, because if it's done right, it can be effective. And I know that the high-rise people and big, they like them. but if a normal commercial roofing company trying to implement safety nets, I think it's another one of those setting yourself up for failure. But I would like, honestly, the next thing that I see OSHA getting rid of in roofing is the safety monitor. That's what I want to see. And I'll be full force behind that.
Do you think that that'll ever happen?
Depends on your industry and how, and the lobbyist, iron workers have up to 15 feet before they need fall protection. I could see the same argument for framers, right? But the iron workers went through like 20 years of like rulemaking just to get that. Or I don't know if that's that I don't know how many years it actually was, but
Right.
they went through a lot like lobbying to get that exemption, right? Like they spent a ton of money, and the safety monitor is kind of the same thing. It's kind of from a safety professional's point of view, it's kind of a joke. But
No, I don't disagree with that.
Yeah. Oh no, I wouldn't take it. I'm just saying I don't understand politics, lobbying
like,
well
as
enough to know.
As a business owner, like that is the cheapest form of
Right.
protection that we can provide, and still be under OSHA guidelines. So, I mean, it makes sense for us to keep it around. And I don't think that OSHA will ever get rid of it, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I mean, and there are still circumstances where that it makes sense to have a safety monitor. I totally agree with that. Just, I mean, if you're using the safety monitor, just make sure it's used correctly and those people have been trained, because I mean, there are some companies that actually do the safety monitoring correctly. And if you're doing it correctly, it can be effective. It's just the percentage of people that are doing it correctly. I would put it at less than 25%. Maybe I'm pessimistic.
No, I would agree with that. The only thing that I bring up with that is, a lot of companies, and, I'm a smaller company, we don't have the financial means to do, cattle gates and, some of the other fall protection systems that are like out there. So, I mean, that makes sense for us right now.
Well, and those cattle guard systems are very, very expensive. I mean, I totally, and then the Raptor cart.
Yeah.
I truly, yeah. I mean, that's $7,000. I couldn't believe it when I looked it up the other day.
For sure.
So I get it. And again, safety monitor, I've seen it used correctly, but I've also been on the accident investigation where the safety monitor was, number one, working, of course, and number two, he's the guy that called 911. So, I mean, again, I do understand. I understand both sides of the coin. And if you fall within that 25-30% of companies that are using it effectively, then I do support it as a way to go. I could see it going to the wayside as well.
For sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, just like to say, I appreciate your presentation and your time. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt, I had one quick question, I guess, for the group. Has anybody utilized the self-rescue packs that attach to your harness?
Yeah, my iron workers have them. Self-rescue. I'm sorry. I'm thinking suspension trauma packs. Not the rescue. Are you talking about like the spider climbers?
No, it's basically what I've seen. Basically, it attaches to the back of your harness, and you attach it to your D-ring. And if you have a fall, they sell them. I think I've seen 30, 60, and 90-foot packages where you pull a cord and it lowers you at like 3 foot per second to the ground.
Controlled descent.
Yeah. I don't know if anybody had used those or not. I thought about getting them for my short duration cruise and stuff like that.
I had tower workers use those controlled descent. I think that'd be interesting to use in a roofing application. I mean, obviously each job's unique, but I like that idea. I mean, that's especially if there's not an aerial lift on site.
Mhm.
Um,
My idea is mainly for my remote guys, like a 2-man crew. There's not a
Mhm.
crew to help assist with everything, and that was my thought pattern.
right. Anybody else have experience with that? Well, yeah, I know that they use it in the tower industry quite a bit, and that's been around at least 10 years. I've seen those. So I bet you the technology has come a long way since I've been involved in that realm. So
Thank you.
Anybody have any more questions? Okay, hearing none. Matt, thank you so much. You're such a great speaker, and I know you can't hear us laughing because we've muted ourselves, but you are very funny, and it keeps it interesting. So thank you so much. We appreciate you being here.
okay, if I can make safety, I mean, if I had my kickball, it'd even be more funny because if someone started falling asleep, I'd get them.
Yeah. So, okay. So for those of you who are joining us post recording, today's code word is chicken egg. So if you're not here right now during recording, I would like for you to email me with the word chicken egg, and we will get you credit. Additional announcements: the safety award application is now open. You can go online to our website to apply at www.mrca.org. Here's a quick tip. As you're answering the questions, I would answer them in a Word document. And then once you've completed answering those questions, copy and paste that into the online form. It might save you a lot of time. If, for some reason you were called away for your computer or something, it's possible you could lose your progress. So just go ahead and answer them in a Word document. And then once you're ready to complete the online form, copy and paste it into that. Another reminder, the safety award application is a requirement to complete the Sharp Plus safety certification program. And so you have in your email inbox a promo code so that you won't have to pay the $500 additional. If you have any questions, let me know. Last thing, the safety award is due July 1st. So that's the due date. Okay, June 2nd, MRCA is having a happy hour in Dallas, Texas. You can find more information on that on our calendar on the website. But if anybody's going to be in Dallas on June 2nd, we'd love to have you out. MRCA is on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. So if you guys feel like it, we would appreciate a like and a share. And anytime we post, we'd appreciate that. Save the date, September 27th through the 29th. That is the joint MRCA RCAT trade show, September 27th through the 29th. We're going to be in beautiful Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas. And I think that's all I've got for you guys today. So we will see you. Oh, I wrote it down. I think it's June 7th for our last webinar leading into conference. So we'll be sending that information out via email. That's all I've got today. So remember to stay safe out there. Thanks, everybody.